Alrighty, so the prompt for this discussion is chapters 5 and 7 discuss the stages of relationships as well as how we communicate social support and closeness. For this discussion, please discuss turning points associated with relationships. What are some turning points you have experienced? Assuming it was positive, in what ways did the turning point lead to a positive change in the relationship? Now think about a turning point that did not guide the relationship in a manner you wanted or expected. In what ways was the turning point negative? Additionally, how are these transitions connected to displays of affection, immediacy, and social support?
I can start this one out. Um, so for like the positive turning points for myself, one thing that I kind of thought about recently was conflict resolution. Being able to, like solve issues and talk through it and handle those sorts of things in like a healthy communicative matter is really really important. And a lot of the times, like, some relationships don't have that open communication where you feel safe, or um where it's healthy and not toxic to resolve those conflicts. Um, but I think that is like a big turning point for relationships, like friendships or intimate ones, where when a problem does come and how you solve it, I think it says a lot about your relationship and if it can go any further and how it is, honestly. Oops, excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And for me, for what I would add to that is when it comes to turning points, like I would say, like, depending on the type of relationship you have with someone, that can alter the outcome. For example, like if you're communicating with like a family member about an issue versus communicating with your boss about an issue, there's going to be very difference, a very big difference in the way you talk and the way you come to an agreement. Where like in family, because there's that aspect of closeness, um, you don't have to be so formal. You kind of know what you're getting into, and you know how to approach it. Whereas when you're talking to a boss, you need to be more formal. You need to be polite, and you need to act a certain way that you wouldn't at home, obviously. And so, relating this to the chapter, I kind of found like in chapter 5, I feel like they talked about the experimenting stage. And I thought that was a really interesting point, because we use the experimenting stage in like almost every aspect of our daily life, especially when we go to new places and meet new people. We're always using that stage. And that also relates to uncertainty reduction, where we always are looking to gain trust and reduce uncertainty between people. So, yeah, I just think the turning points, they kind of vary based on the relationship at hand.
I agree with a lot of like what you said about the difference between having an issue with like your parents with communication and with your boss, because there definitely is a line there. Um, Going back to like what the question was saying about like one positive turning point, with me, I feel like I experienced like in my relationship, I went through a challenging time with my boyfriend where we didn't really know how to communicate with each other for a while. And I feel like in the end, we emerged stronger. I feel like we faced a significant obstacle that required us to communicate openly and support each other emotionally and work together as a team rather than apart. And I feel like this turning point led to a level of trust and understanding and intimacy in a relationship, and it became more affectionate towards each other. We learned like that we each have different ways of communicating. um I know, like, for me, I feel like everybody can read my mind and I just don't like say it out loud, but you can either tell on my face or like my body language, where he's just very he says everything all the time. And so when we finally learned how to communicate with each other, we were able to overcome that. And I think in chapter 7 it talks about a lot about of like affection and intimacy. And I feel like there's just a big degree of communication that goes into that. Uh, but like on the other hand, a negative turning point could be like, I couldn't think of one personally, but when like somebody disagrees with you and you're unable to resolve it despite efforts of like communication or common ground, it just leads to being unresolved. But there is like a level that you are gonna need to overcome that on one point. But yeah.
No, I think you brought up great points because I can totally relate. Like my relationship, we also have two different communication styles, and neither of them are wrong in a sense. We just like I choose to think about something before I speak it out into like the universe. For like not fear of how somebody else is going to feel, but I just want to make sure what I'm saying is what I want to say versus my boyfriend style is very much I'm just going to say what I say and I'm not going to think about it and then I'm just going to handle the repercussions of that. And so when we were able to overcome that and like understand the others, like me getting quiet when I'm thinking isn't me shutting down, it's just me thinking before I speak. And maybe we shouldn't always say 100% of what's on our mind without thinking, because then there is going to be a huge repercussion if it's not what you wanted it and how somebody else will interpret it. But I think you're right. We did come back stronger once we were able to understand the other's style. So that was like the positive outcome. And when I think about these transitions, it definitely led us to get a deeper understanding of the other and kind of like why, like what experience we have gone through kind of like make us who we are. And like that in turn shows like how we show affection to the other, how we show support to one another, especially with still being in school, him working a full-time job, and all like the craziness that is our lives right now. So I like that you brought that up. And I think another like the negative that you brought up, the one thing like if people can't resolve their communication like styles and like understanding, I think one big one, not personally for me, but I've seen with my friends is almost a layer. I don't want to say resentment because that's kind of a harsher term, but sort of similar. It's off-putting like to continue like wanting to engage with a person when you guys can't come to a resolution almost. Um but yeah, that's kind of like my thoughts on that.
I
Yes,
agree.
oh, I'm sorry, Maya. I also agree with everything you said. I also forgot to add in what I thought my negative turning points were. So um I don't think we mentioned these ones yet, but with relationships, um I think this hasn't necessarily like happened to me exactly, but my friend just dealt with cheating. So I think that is like a very negative point or turning point that breaks a relationship, you know. Um, that's a big one. I think that's become very normalized today. Um, I just think and it shatters trust and creates an emotional breakdown connection of between partners, and it's just definitely a negative turning point, I'd say. And then another one I thought of was life changes, which I have personally dealt with, where it could be like a job loss or um someone moving or a sickness in the family or just some major life changes that impact your life negatively can definitely be turning points for relationships as they like affect how you are and how your close circle around you or close relationships show up for you when you are in those times of needs.
I agree with you like 100% with that, with both the points you made of negativity. Like with like what you brought up with cheating, I feel like there isn't like that turning point is just so hard to come back from. And like, I hope a lot of relationships don't like come back from that because that is just wrong. But I like agree with you because I understand like understanding and navigating these turning points I feel like contribute to a healthier and more fulfilling relationships in the long run. So I think that like once you figure it out now, then it'll lead to a healthier relationship in the end. So I feel like all of like learning about these is gonna help like me, not even in with my relationship right now with my boyfriend, but like even in my relationship with work, learning how to communicate through with my colleagues and like moving up in my position, like I need to learn how to communicate with more people to be more successful in my job. So I think learning these turning points and like being able to see them is going to be really good.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys. And real quick, I just want to add my turning points. So a positive turning point for me would be getting a job promotion for my real estate job last summer, which was it was cool, but it was like a whole new thing where it was like, okay, now I'm a level up, now I gotta work harder, now I gotta kind of lock in, you know what I mean? And for a negative turn point, I don't know if it's really negative, but in the beginning it was when I first moved when I first came out to Arizona. It was like a really scary and frightening move for me. I wasn't sure like if I was gonna like it, if I was gonna stay, all that stuff. But yeah, basically, just by having like those closeness relationships around me and people to talk to, I was able to make like better decisions based on what I would have made myself. So yeah, I feel like turning points, a lot of it comes from like the people you have around you and the support you have from that as well.
No, I completely agree. So I also moved to Arizona my freshman year of college from California, like away from home. Nobody, like no friends, no family out here. So I think having like a support, like finding your close friends out here when you first move out here is definitely scary. But once you find that support system, at least I've been very fortunate enough to find a group of girls who really like we all kind of have the same goals and we want each other to be the best version of themselves. So once you find it, it's a really rewarding thing to have.
Yeah, definitely. Especially me too. I came from out of state as well. So like when I first met my roommates here, it was a big relief to just like have some support behind me in this new place, you know what I mean? And so that was a good way to help me through it.
No, definitely. I agree with you. And I think like that's the most rewarding thing is once you're able to like establish a way to communicate, like everything, I don't want to say is always easy because everybody goes through things, but like we are able to kind of take that into our day-to-day lives. Okay, so I'm also just going to say what Brienne threw in the chat. But she said that, hi, I agree with everyone. Like, everyone is different in regards to communicating. I also agree with cheating and life changes can affect and lessen communication skills.
I think going back to like the whole college thing, like I think that's something maybe we could all agree on that was a turning point, good or bad, like negative or positive, with some relationships we've had. Like I'm from out of state, so I think a lot of my back home relationships took a strain. So I think, that was a turning point for our relationships, like me moving to college and seeing how those relationships would like be impacted and last and stuff. And then even moving here and like gaining new friends, seeing how those would last throughout the years and see, if we'd still continue friendships um, after we moved out of the dorms and kind of went on with the rest of our college. So I think that was maybe one that I did not, as like the prompt says, it says, think about a turning point that did not guide the relationship in a manner you wanted or expected. I just think maybe my freshman roommates, I thought we would be, very good friends for a long time. And I think it's very hard to live with complete strangers sometimes. So that that was a negative turning point, I think. Um, and I think it just came down to like a communication breakdown of not being able to like communicate well and unresolved conflict and stuff like that. But oh yeah, the chat marriage and having children can also be turning points. I do agree with that. But that was just my little extra on the discussion.
I agree with everything you said about like your turning points with college and roommates. I think that definitely does have an effect to communication in general.
Real quick, adding on to what Brienne said about marriage and having children can also be turning points. Yeah, it's 100% true. And but also like divorce, I feel like can have even like stronger turning points. I know um I'm a product of parents of divorce, so like I know like how much that can change like a child's life and just like the family's life altogether. But sometimes it's, or usually most of the time it's for the good for most for everybody in the family, so kind of worked out.
I'm
Liam,
with
I
Liam. One.
yeah,
I'm
I'm
also,
sorry.
oh, you're okay. I'm also a child of divorce, so I totally get it. It was for what was best for my parents. But they also put me first, so I was really fortunate there. But I know we're running out of time, so that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I will say this and then we could end, but I was just gonna say that my parents are I'm lucky they're still together, but my mom was in a previous marriage before my dad, and that's where my brother came from. So I have a half brother, and it divorce has affected him in a lot of ways that I could never imagine, or he's gone through very different, life turning points more negatively than me. But that is definitely a big one just because I've seen that firsthand, not on myself, but on a sibling.
I agree. I know we don't have a lot of time, but like my parents are also divorced, and I feel like it does have a effect on how you communicate, like seeing that like the way they communicate and that either like teaches you to either communicate that way, or like for me it made me do the absolute opposite. Like I don't use yelling or screaming or like all of that in like the way I communicate, so I think that is a turning point, like a negative one as well.
Okay, just to wrap it up, Brienne said yes, divorce can be positive or negative depending on the type of relationship, which I think is really true because I think Maya said it perfectly. I don't resort to yelling or screaming in my relationship, and that's because I saw that firsthand at the beginning of my parents' divorce. So I think that's one of the positives to come from a divorce. But with that being said, I'm going to stop the recording now unless anybody else has anything else to say.
I think we're good.